Before we start learning about OKRs, I want to help you identify which problems you really want to solve with them so you can ensure you're successful in solving those problems. There's no point changing how you're working unless you have a good reason. Just because Google does OKRs or you've heard they're great or you read a book doesn't mean you should use them. So in this video, we're going to figure out what isn't working as well as you want it to be. What your pain points and desired benefits are. If you know already, this part will be easy for you, but follow along anyway so you can make your pain points explicit, record them, and refer back to them later as you're adapting OKRs to your situation. Let's start by talking about Underpants, or rather Underpants Gnomes. This was an episode of South Park back in 1998 that I think is pretty relevant, and it illustrates something about micromanagement and vague leadership, and you may recognize some of your own situation in it. In this episode, the boys discovered that these gnomes were stealing underpants from their bedrooms late at night. So they chased the gnomes to their cave and saw a huge pile of underpants, and gnomes busy working, carrying underpants in trolleys and sorting underpants and so on. They then have a conversation with one of the gnomes that went something like this. What are you going to do with all these underpants? Well, collecting underpants is just phase 1. So what's phase 2? Hey, what's phase 2? And no one knew what phase 2 was. But phase 3 is profit, right? So this is their business plan. And this is a good illustration of how a lot of management works. We either specify the tasks, the collecting underpants, and we micromanage, or we specify the end result we don't want without enough direction, the profit, and we have vague leadership. And we're missing the important bit in the middle, phase 2. And this is where OKRs come in. So let's dig a little deeper into this particular problem and think about the gnome experience or the employee experience here. There's presumably some sort of business plan somewhere, but it's not clear what it is. Maybe it's making recycled cotton-based paper, maybe selling cotton scrap rags, maybe underpants as a service, I don't know. But the point is that any intelligent and motivated gnome would have their own idea and therefore come up with different ways to improve based on what they thought phase 2 was. Maybe one focuses on white cotton underpants, another on getting a variety of styles, and one tries to identify other sources of cotton. You can see that this lack of clarity leads to misalignment, frustration, and wasted effort. And pretty soon, the most intelligent and motivated gnomes will leave, and they'll be left with the ones who are happy just to collect underpants all day. These two problems, micromanagement and vague leadership, are representative of a lot of the problems my clients experience and motivate their interest in OKRs. When we're micromanaging, we're telling people to do activities and tasks with insufficient context, running events, creating features, closing tickets, and so on. I refer to these as collecting underpants. If your team is collecting underpants, you're probably not empowering them enough or getting the full benefit of their capabilities. On the other hand, when we're giving them too vague direction, we're setting too high level or abstract targets and not giving enough constraint to show how they should get there. Sometimes this is something like profit, but it could be more specific to our individual team's area, something like NPS or reliability or revenue. But if it's not specific enough and the strategy is not clear enough, the result is that there's a little alignment and there's lack of focus. Everyone creates their own version of the strategy and their preferred next steps, and there can be a lot of conflict and waste, and certainly there's missed opportunity. One thing that can happen, by the way, is that this vague direction is easily confused with empowering the team. This idea that good management is getting out of the way. But consider the gnomes. They have managers, presumably, who got out of the way. But are they empowered? They don't know enough or have enough context to be meaningfully empowered. Empowering people requires giving them the constraints within which they're empowered. And hence, this is where OKRs come in. Now, of course, if you're a manager within an organization, you usually have managers too. It may well be that your team suffers from some of these problems, but sometimes you suffer from these problems from your own managers. If that's the case, recommend that they do this course too. But in the meantime, excuses are for losers. So if we want to be successful, we have to figure out how to navigate this as well, and OKRs can help. In the next video, we'll talk about some other common problems my clients encounter and that you might find familiar.